Audio Diary 2, March 2026. Shaping and generating wind assets with the Supercollider. For a freelance game audio project, I was tasked with recording and designing expressive wind assets. I knew I wanted the wind to be based on recordings of objects I have at my disposal at home, and not be based on synthesis nor field recordings, to allow me to experiment a bit more freely and with greater room for adjustments, and to set up a system to more easily harvest variations of assets. And this is what I ended up doing. I have this plastic channel used for cable management on surfaces that I blow into and record with the microphone. Sliding the cover off slightly will change the resulting comb filter-like timbre. I knew I wanted to record some more static source and let the Supercollider patch do most of the envelope and filter shaping, so I am not imitating the wind gusts and dynamics too much with the source. And with the source recorded, I move into Supercollider and use the patch I've written. Let's listen to the final output briefly, and I'll explain each section individually. Final synth code looks like this. First, I define the envelope with variables for attack, release, and envelope curvature, with some randomness to the overall envelope amount. This envelope is used as a control parameter for a number of things, like overall amplitude, sampler playback precision, filter frequency, and so on. Sample playback is done with this granular sample UGen. I have control over the sample playback position, modulated by the envelope, the playback frequency, modulated by the envelope once again, and the grain window size, and so on. With the do command, I am able to recursively process a signal n amount of times through the same setup. So here I am running it through a pitch shifter 2 times. With a larger pitch dispersion, you get a lovely wavering pitch and some stereo field width, which works well with the non-tonal noisy source material. Here, I recursively run the signal through a frequency shifter setup 4 times, each time with 8 frequency shifters in series, with very low parameter settings, which will again affect the phase and stereo imaging in a pleasing way. And just for the sake of clarity, this line here sums the resulting channels to stereo. Here I have an overall high-pass filter, and here is where the primary filtering takes place. A resonant low-pass filter sweeps over a given frequency width controlled by the envelope control parameter. I've added some controllable randomness to the filter frequency and amplitude to make sure the resulting signal is never too static. And the last few lines are just overall dynamics. A master compressor shaping the signal by the envelope, master gain, and then outputting it to Reaper. Playing back the synth on the server looks like this. Pause and digest at your own pace. And that's the process. The very handy thing with working with sampler-based setups like this is that I can of course just swap out the sample in the system if I need a different source timbre for the wind, and new textures can be achieved quite quickly. Lastly, let's try to mess with the patch a bit, which is the main reason for me doing this in Supercollider and writing it myself, to arbitrarily choose parameter settings that commercially available plugins might not allow you to do. One of my favorite things to do with the granular sample UGen is to mess with the window size, which will vary the timbre quite drastically. In the shown examples, I've used a larger window size to allow for smooth overlapping instances. If we reduce this, you start getting more of the expected granular flavor. Reducing this to something very short mangles the signal into something more textual. Which might be useful for various other source material, but probably not for wind. Thank you for listening and watching.